The man who stands at the pinnacle of professional wrestling today carries secrets that would shake the very foundation of everything you thought you knew about Roman Reigns. Behind the championship belts and the familiar chants lies a story so captivating that once you hear it you'll never look at the tribal chief the same way again. Before we dive into these shocking revelations, make sure to hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what's coming next on this channel. Roman Reigns wasn't always destined for the spotlight despite what WWE wants you to believe. Born Lady Joseph Anoa'i on May 25, 1985 in Pensacola, Florida, he grew up in a household where wrestling royalty ran through his veins, but his heart belonged to an entirely different sport. While his father Sika and his brother Rosie were making names for themselves in the squared circle, young Joe, as his family called him, was obsessed with football. He didn't just play the sport casually either. He dominated on the field at Pensacola Catholic High School and later at Escambia High School, where his talent caught the attention of college scouts across the nation. His dream wasn't to step into a wrestling ring, it was to make it to the NFL and become one of the greatest defensive tackles the league had ever seen. The football path took him to Georgia Tech, where he played for the Yellow Jackets and became a force to be reckoned with on the defensive line. His college career showed promise, and in 2007 he signed with the Minnesota Vikings as an undrafted free agent. This was his moment. This was supposed to be where his story began, but fate had different plans. The Vikings released him and he briefly joined the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad before being cut again. His NFL dream was slipping through his fingers like sand, and for the first time in his life Roman Reigns faced real failure. What nobody talks about is how devastating this period was for him. He had spent his entire life building towards professional football only to have that door slammed shut in his face. Depression crept in and he questioned everything about his identity and purpose. The wrestling world didn't immediately welcome him with open arms either. When he finally decided to pursue the family business in 2010, he wasn't given a free pass because of his last name. WWE sent him to their developmental territory, Florida Championship Wrestling, where he had to prove himself from scratch. He wrestled under the name Roman Leakey and the crowds were lukewarm at best. The matches were sloppy at times and he struggled to find his footing in a world that was completely different from the football field. Critics within the company whispered that he didn't have what it took, and some questioned whether he was just riding on his family's coattails. This period of struggle is something WWE has tried to erase from history books because it doesn't fit the narrative of the unstoppable force they built him into today. What changed everything was a phone call that almost never happened. In 2012, WWE was planning to bring up a new faction called The Shield, and they needed 3 guys who could deliver both in the ring and on the microphone. Originally, Roman Reigns wasn't on the shortlist for the group. The creative team had other names in mind, but one producer fought hard to get him included, arguing that his look and presence were undeniable even if his skills were still developing. That producer's insistence changed the trajectory of wrestling history. When The Shield debuted at Survivor Series 2012, attacking Ryback and helping CM Punk retain his WWE Championship, the wrestling world was put on notice. Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose got most of the early praise for their work, but Roman Reigns became the breakout star because of his raw intensity and that Superman punch that seemed to come out of nowhere. Behind the scenes, though, tensions within The Shield were building in ways fans never saw. While the 3 men presented a united front on television, their personalities clashed constantly backstage. Roman Reigns was quiet and reserved, preferring to keep to himself, while Ambrose was chaotic and unpredictable, often improvising segments that left his partners scrambling to keep up. Rollins played the mediator role, but even he grew frustrated with the creative direction at times. There were heated arguments about who should get the spotlight and who was being positioned as the breakout star. Roman Reigns felt the pressure mounting as WWE officials made it clear they saw him as the future face of the company. This created an uncomfortable dynamic because he knew his partners were more experienced and technically better wrestlers, but the machine had chosen him to be the next John Cena, whether he was ready or not. The real turning point came in 2014 when Roman Reigns was forced to take time off due to a legitimate injury that WWE kept extremely quiet about. He had been dealing with a hernia issue that was getting progressively worse, but the company pushed him to keep working through the pain because they had major plans for him at WrestleMania 30. The injury became so severe that he finally had to undergo emergency surgery, missing crucial television time. What fans don't know is that during his recovery, Roman Reigns seriously considered walking away from wrestling entirely. He felt like he was being pushed into a role he wasn't prepared for, and the physical toll was already mounting just 3 years into his main roster career. His wife Galena was pregnant with their daughter at the time, and he questioned whether the sacrifice was worth it. Phone calls with his cousin Dwayne Johnson helped him refocus and reminded him that the Anoa'i legacy meant carrying on even when things got difficult. When he returned, WWE made the decision to split up The Shield and push Roman Reigns as a solo star. The reaction from fans was not what anyone expected. Instead of embracing him as the next top babyface, crowds began to reject him in ways that shocked company officials. The 2015 Royal Rumble became a disaster when Roman won the match and the Philadelphia crowd booed him out of the building despite WWE booking him as the conquering hero. This pattern continued for years, with Roman Reigns receiving some of the most hostile reactions in modern wrestling history even though he was supposed to be the good guy. Backstage, this created an impossible situation. Roman wanted to turn heel and embrace the boos, but Vince McMahon refused to budge, insisting that Roman was their guy and the fans would eventually come around. They never did. The health crisis that changed everything came in 2018, and it's something Roman Reigns has been incredibly brave about sharing publicly. On October 22, 2018, he stood in the ring and announced that his leukemia had returned. He had been diagnosed years earlier in 2008 but had been in remission ever since. Now the cancer was back and he had to relinquish the Universal Championship to focus on treatment. The announcement sent shockwaves through the wrestling community, and suddenly all the boos and negative reactions seemed trivial. What people don't realize is how close Roman Reigns came to not surviving this battle. The chemotherapy treatments were brutal, and there were days when he could barely get out of bed. His hair fell out and his body weakened to the point where he couldn't even play with his children without feeling exhausted. During his darkest moments, he made peace with the possibility that he might never wrestle again, or worse, that this disease might take him away from his family permanently. His return in February 2019 after announcing he was back in remission was one of the most emotional moments in WWE history. The same fans who had booed him relentlessly now gave him a hero's welcome because they had been reminded that wrestling is just entertainment, but life and death are real. Roman Reigns came back with a new perspective and appreciation for his position, but creatively WWE made a massive mistake. They went right back to booking him the exact same way as before, expecting fans to cheer him simply because of his health battle. The goodwill lasted only a few months before the negative reactions returned because WWE refused to evolve the character. Roman himself grew increasingly frustrated knowing that something had to change but not having the creative control to make it happen. The transformation into the Tribal Chief character in 2020 was actually Roman Reigns' idea, and he had to fight tooth and nail to make it happen. When WWE went into the pandemic era and began running shows from the Performance Center without crowds, Roman Reigns made the controversial decision to stay home. He had just welcomed twin boys with his wife, and with his compromised immune system due to the leukemia, he didn't feel safe working during the height of the pandemic. WWE was furious, and there were legitimate discussions about whether they should move on from him entirely. Vince McMahon felt betrayed, and some within the company called Roman selfish for putting his health and family above the business. But Roman Reigns stood firm in his decision and used that time away to completely reimagine what his character should be. When he returned at SummerSlam 2020 attacking both Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt, he came back as a completely different person. Gone was the smiling babyface who cut corny promos. In his place was a cold, calculated heel who carried himself like wrestling royalty. He grew out his hair and beard, embraced his Samoan heritage in a way WWE had never let him before, and aligned himself with Paul Heyman in a pairing nobody saw coming. The fans immediately responded positively because finally, after all these years, Roman Reigns was interesting. He was allowed to show layers and complexity instead of being a one-dimensional superhero. Behind the scenes, Roman negotiated for more creative input over his storylines, and WWE had little choice but to give it to him because they desperately needed him back. The Tribal Chief run has been the most successful period of Roman Reigns' career, but it came at a cost that fans don't see. His schedule has been significantly reduced compared to other top stars, and there's a reason for that. Roman Reigns deals with chronic pain and fatigue as lasting effects from both his leukemia treatments and years of physical punishment in the ring. He's had multiple conversations with WWE about retirement and has privately told close friends that he doesn't plan to wrestle into his 40s. The company has accommodated his limited schedule because they know he's the biggest draw they have, but it's created resentment among other wrestlers who work full-time and don't get the same opportunities or pay. Roman is aware of these feelings, but his priority is preserving his health for his family, not proving anything to critics in the locker room. The relationship between Roman Reigns and The Rock has been strained at times despite being family. While Dwayne has publicly praised Roman, there have been moments of tension, particularly regarding who gets credit for elevating the Anoa'i name in mainstream culture. The Rock built a Hollywood empire and became one of the biggest stars on the planet, transcending wrestling entirely. Roman Reigns has stayed loyal to WWE and the wrestling business, which some family members see as the more honorable path. During family gatherings, there have been awkward moments where this dynamic plays out, with younger members of the family caught in between. Roman has never spoken negatively about The Rock publicly, but those close to him know there's a competitiveness there that goes beyond what cameras capture. His relationship with his children is what drives him more than any championship or main event. Roman has 5 kids, and being present for them is why he's willing to work a reduced schedule and risk the political fallout within WWE. He's missed birthdays and important moments because of wrestling, and those regrets weigh on him. His oldest daughter has started to understand what her father does for a living and has attended shows where she's seen fans both cheer and boo him. Explaining that dynamic to a child is complicated, and Roman has been protective about keeping his family life separate from his wrestling persona. His wife Galena has been his rock through everything, and without her support system, he's admitted he would have walked away years ago. The financial side of Roman Reigns' career is something that rarely gets discussed. He's made millions from WWE, but he's also been incredibly smart with his money, investing in real estate and businesses outside of wrestling. Unlike many wrestlers who blow through their earnings, Roman has built generational wealth for his family. He owns multiple properties in Florida and has investment portfolios that ensure his children will be taken care of long after he hangs up his boots. This business mindset separates him from many of his peers who live paycheck to paycheck despite being on television every week. Roman learned from watching older wrestlers struggle financially after retirement and was determined not to repeat those mistakes. The pressure of being the face of WWE during the company's transition to a new ownership under TKO and Endeavor has added another layer of stress to Roman Reigns' life. He's essentially been the bridge between the Vince McMahon era and whatever comes next, and that's a massive responsibility. Every decision he makes is scrutinized by executives who are looking at wrestling through a corporate lens rather than a creative one. Roman has had to become a politician in addition to being a performer, navigating relationships with people who don't understand the wrestling business but control his future. It's exhausting, and there are days when he questions whether it's all worth it. The truth about Roman Reigns is that he's human despite WWE's best efforts to present him as something larger than life. He's dealt with failure, rejection, serious illness, and the constant pressure of living up to a legendary family name. He's made sacrifices that most people will never understand and has carried burdens that would have crushed lesser individuals. The character you see on television is just a fraction of who he really is, and the secrets he carries reveal a man who's more complex and interesting than any script could ever capture. Now that you know the real story behind the Tribal Chief, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you never miss another deep dive into the untold stories of wrestling's biggest stars.